the thing that was crazy about Fantastic Damage to me is that, well, I think one of my issues with Fantastic Damage is that it never felt hip hop to me the whole way through. Like it never felt like I could be on the block and bump my head to it type energy. This feels, I get that on this album a couple times, but you get that with this song. Like this song, it gives you some of that energy that it's just, this is a hip hop record. There's no second guessing what it is. You know what I mean? So yeah, this is a keep for me.
Yeah, I mean, this song is definitely like the calling card for what would be the Def Jux sound. I think there's also something to say that LP is hip hop at his core, the breaks and the samples that he's using, the aesthetic. But again, those Blade Runner influences, all of these other things can drive it into an area that couldn't fit well in a mix with some of his contemporaries, traditional. And I think if you look at what he does with Run the Jewels, and something that you need to acknowledge about in contrasting Cold Vein with Fantastic Damage, if you put LP, who is, again, at his core hip hop, but bringing in a lot of other industrial punk rock things, and you pair him with basically black voices, whether it's Killer Mike or if it is Cannibal Ox, you get something that I think is a little bit more palatable, that you're like, okay, this has that, because on Fantastic Damage, a lot of it is just L rocking solo, and that can be a little bit too close to the fringes of some listeners to be like,
I love you, Sean, because that's what I was saying, but I didn't want to say it, but you held me down. You know what I'm saying? That's the difference is black people. You know what I'm saying?
I love, but
I wanted to know that this was a safe space for you to talk about white people. Yeah.
You saw how I tried to dance around that. Sean was like, man,
I personally, I love Fantastic Damage. You know what I'm saying? Like, for me, Deep Space 9mm, Da Nang, The Thing, you know what I'm saying? Like, these songs are just when Thanos was pulling from the moon and throwing it at you. To me, that's the audio version of that. But I get what you mean, because again, one of the beautiful things about being me is that I know that my mind and where I listen and how I absorb music and art is different from the average or different people. So I'm always fascinated, and I'm I know I love this, but everybody ain't gonna like this shit. Now imagine being that same person who reviews art and music for a living. That is a mind fucking half.
That is a tricky situation. Yeah, we're all DJs in our lives, whether or not it's in a professional setting. And yeah, if it's 2001, and if I knew MidaZ back then, and I have if both the records were out, Fantastic Damage and Cold Vein, and knowing that I'm gonna try to put MidaZ on, I'm gonna be like, do I play him Ox Out the Cage, or do I play him Deep Space 9mm?
Exactly.
I gotta play the Can Ox shit, because it's already going to be abrasive, but maybe there's some thread lines there that he's going to like it. And then once you're open to that, then I could be like, all right, now check out some of this weirder shit, finger quotes. You know what I mean?
To me, this is one of the things that you learn growing up in the late 90s into the early zeros, when you're trying, and when someone was like, hey, could you recommend me some anime? And I'm like, all right, first, I'm not stupid. I'm not falling for the banana in the tailpipe. What do you like, first of all? Then we go from there. Then we pull you in. I don't play you fucking Legend of the Overfiend to start. That's a mistake a lot of people make doing that type of thing. I'm not going to throw you into the deep end of the pool. Let's get you here where you can wade.
Yeah.
And then get you over here where you can maybe, drum paddle. And then once you can handle that, then maybe I'll let you swim. You don't start at the deep end of the pool.
This is probably the only song on the album. I mean, okay, we'll talk about B-Boy Alpha when we get there, but this is probably the only song on the album that would have an outside chance to live on a doo-wop tape.
Yeah, I know where you were going already. Because I had a conversation for
like a clue tape, maybe. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I've had this conversation for almost 25 years, so I knew you were going.
I would contend that there is one that I think has an even greater chance, but I'll acknowledge it when we get
we'll
to
get
it.
that.